For those of you who have been coming to our meetings a lot, thank you for returning. You know, there's something about the Police Advisory Commission, it's kind of like a microcosm of life. I mean, it should be reflecting Philadelphia, and in any microcosm of life, there are, like the city, there's struggles and there's joys, and we have that in our PAC, and so the commission wants to extend our condolences to our Commissioner, Sonia Velasquez. We're sorry about the loss of your brother, and we hope that you're comforted by your memories.
Thank you.
And with sorrows, because it is a microcosm of life, we have some joy, and we were hoping to congratulate our executive director on the birth of his new baby, but he's not here. So it will be so nice we can do it. Finally made that work. Okay, so other things that we want to announce at our February executive session meeting. We elected officers, so Ben Geffen and Erica Atwood. Erica was unable to join us this evening, are our new vice presidents. George Mosey is our new parliamentarian. Gonna keep a strict rule here. The position we talked about what that role involves, and if any of the commissioners are interested in what that role entails, it's described in the IOPs. The main responsibility of the secretary is taking the minutes and driving them and making them available for distribution at the following week's meeting. Folks who are interested in that, want to reconsider the opportunity to participate in that way, please let us know. The next item is on our agenda is the IOPs. For those of the public, you caught us on the tail end of our IOP discussion. We are hopeful that we will have our draft IOPs approved within the week. The next item on our schedule, on our agenda, is political activity. There were some questions about the PAC's ability to participate in political activity, and so we have tons of answers on all of that. So I not only did I email you, but Anthony has shared with us his conversation with the Board of Ethics, so we can pass those around. Phoebe's conversation, sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Phoebe has also shared some information, and the very short version is that because we are a purely advisory commission, different from other committees, commissions, and boards in the city that have different types of powers, our limitation is primarily things done while in duty. So we cannot take any particular action in political activity while we are in our role as commissioners. Hopefully the attached materials that we're now distributing will explain that all in greater detail. You know that there were some questions. Bilal, you had some questions from our last meeting. Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, so we have no questions about political activity beyond what's in that summary. Our next order of business is to welcome Manuel Ramos, who is
Daniel.
Oh, forgive me.
It's okay. It happens all the time because there's a Manny Ramos that works for Clip, and he's like the greatest, right?
I'm sure you're pretty great.
So good evening. My name is Daniel Ramos. I'm with 311, and I was asked to give a elevator speech on the difference of 311 and 911, and also what is our role with 911. So I'll start off with our role with 911. The last 4 graduating class at the academy, I had the privilege of going up there and talking to them about using 311 and how to use 311 from their MDTs, and how to use 311 as a community engagement tool. How to, to use it when they're walking on that first initial 3 months on their foot beat, how to use that tool to report a vacant lot or something like that. And then, you know, this is the example that I use at the academy. So you're on the corner of, I'm gonna use Howard and Dolphin, that's where I grew up at. You're on the corner of Howard and Dolphin, there's a vacant lot there. One of the neighbors see you reporting that vacant lot. 3 months later, it gets fixed, you're on that corner still, they're gonna know that it was you who did that, right? Oh wow, they reported it. Or, you know, you can use that to, you know, use our mobile app to use different, to report different issues, and it helps. It helps establish that credibility out in the communities, right? With the neighbors. So the last 4 classes, Sergeant Rawls from 8th and Race, he's invited me over during his 4-hour block to come out and to talk to them a couple of days before they graduate. So so that promotes more usage from police, you know, using our system, 311 system, right? They go in, they get called for a short dumping. That's not a priority call, right? But the overnight crew will, you know, team will come out and usually change it out and add the DD-214, wrong one. Add the what is it, the 42, and actually enter that service request in the system as an illegal dumping now, right? So now those are the types of issues types of examples that police are using while they're out on everyday, you know, patrol out there. Okay. So I always use the example of when to call 911 and 311, right? I always use this example. You look outside your window, you wake up in the morning, you look outside your window and you see this big tag, graffiti tag, right? So someone done did the do, right? They came, they tagged up in the middle of the night or whatever. You will call 311 and we will facilitate someone to come out and clip. Manny Rabels will come out, his crew will come out and clean the walls and all that, right? But if you look outside your window and you see someone in the act of graffitiing, then you will call 911, right? Because they're vandalizing something, right? I'm not sure what the priority is. I'm not sure how long it'll take for them to come, but it's documented as a 911 issue, right? And then when the police come for the call, they see the graffiti there, they can take the picture, use the mobile app, right? So the same thing with an abandoned auto. You know, there's a car parked on your block and it's there, right? In the wintertime especially, you can tell this within the wintertime. A week later, the tire, the air and the tire pressure starting to go down, right? 2 weeks later, you have 2 flat tires on one side. 3 weeks later, this car's still there, it hasn't moved. That's an abandoned vehicle, per se, right? So you will call 311. You wake up, you see a car there in the middle of the night, you come home from whatever, there's a car there in the middle of the night, and it has 2 rims missing, right? Then more than likely, that's a 911 call because the car was stolen and it's starting to get stripped, right? So those are the differences of when you call 311 and when you call 911. At 311, we have the capacity to transfer the calls over to 911 if there's a priority call or something like that, right? So we can do that. Our call center is actually the backup call center for 911. So 911 just got, 8th and Race just got their computer network just refurbished, right? So they came and they kicked us all out of City Hall, right? All of our agents. And then we were at Fire and all the other places. So at our call center, you know, every once in a while we have police dispatch come there and take over a cluster of computers, right? So I was in the Army for 16 years, and I have a tendency, I talk real fast, so if you want me to slow down or something, I'll slow down, but if you want me, I can't speak faster. And but I'm not, I won't. So a lot of people, a lot of the audience, right? You guys are from, you representing a community group, community-based organization, maybe a faith-based group, right? Something, or even the members of the commission, right? Or some type of RCO or NGO. Well, you know, we have all kinds of, right? But so what's good about 311 and our system is we have different programs, right? We have this one program called the Neighborhood Liaison Program, where you can take a training and, you want to just pass some of these back? You guys in the ground. So we have, it's this one here, right? You could take a training, it's a 2-hour computer-based training, and we actually give you access to the 301 portal, the same portal that the agents have on the convenience of your own home, right? And what happens is when you're part of a community-based organization, faith-based, whatever type of organization, we link all the accounts together, okay? So, I'm going to use ASE on Allegheny. So at ASE, we went out and we trained all their community connectors. All their community connectors, they go out now and they report alleys, vacant lots, all the quality of life issues in their community. Then all that rolls up to ASE's account. So when every quarter we give ASE a report on all the activity that they've reported, all the 301 activity, right? So what's great about their reports is they're able to say, well, we have housing for 75 seniors, we gave housing to 75 seniors, we did all this, but then you can also report the impact that they had in the quality of life in their community. Because they say at 301 we reported bam, 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 right? So we can do that for your organizations, for your groups, or for your, and go out, train them, put it all in there. And then if you host trainings, you're able to flow everything up. So even if, like for Free Library, right? We do a training at Free Library main branch. Now, whoever gets trained from there, it goes under that account for the hierarchy, right? And they're able to then flow stuff down. So you're able to advertise. You're able to, and nothing political, it can't be political, right? But anything community-based, you're able to advertise down in the system. So it's a great way to disseminate information out to the community. So my information is on the bottom somewhere on the blueprint. Right there says Daniel, just say Daniel Ramos, but that's my telephone number and my email address. Then we have the mobile app, right? So the mobile app is, the next best thing to sliced bread. That's what I say, and I'll stick to it, even though there's some, but you can pass that over. So our mobile app is the same thing. We go out, we do trainings. Most of the new recruits, this is what they use, the mobile app. It's easier than the MDTs. It's easier than the computers at the district, because they all know how to use it, right? So with the mobile app, same thing. If anyone works for the city of Philadelphia, right, you can use your phila.gov email address on the mobile app, and it reports to your account and all that, right, into your whatever department and all that you work at. Okay? A rack card just on 301 is better. How to call 301, when to call 301. Different types. You can email us. You can use social media. So I'm going to end with this. But last year we had this one around this time, right? Where we got quite a bit of snow. But then a couple of days we had 50 to 60, right? So we got an email, we got a Twitter, that said, hey, 3311, this 100 block hasn't seen a plow since Rizzle's era, right? So we got that, I was okay. It got retweeted 240 times to us with a different address in South Philly, right? So I go to the office and they said, well, what are we going to do with this? I said, well, we're going to put in a service request for every address. So we responded to all 240 something tweets. Thank you for contacting 301. This is your service request number, right? And they all thought that we were, that it was just going to go in deaf ears, right? But we responded to it. So we respond to all tweets on there. You can, take a picture, add us, and then they'll. Say again? Where the street? Nah, I don't think so. Probably not, right? But it was still, but we still responded, so we still put in that request, and it still goes. At 311, what's great about 311 is every single service request or every single contact is saved, right? So anytime there's an event where a building collapses, anything like that, the first thing we get is how many calls were for that address, right? How many reports? Same thing with 911, right? How many times did something wrong? It's the same way with us. So that 100 block is now on our list, right? With how many people contacted, on that 100, but it's there, right? And we keep it. We keep all that record. We have everything from the last 10 years. It's in archive, so anyone can ever contact and find out. Also, we have that if anyone's, we have atlas.phila.gov, right? A mapping system, our new City of Philadelphia public mapping system that you can use, and you can find out how many reports of 311 were per address per parcel, and it gives you all kind of LNI information or anything like that. So that's my quick elevator speech. I usually have a PowerPoint. I usually have all this. But I'll stay in the back, for afterwards in case someone wants to talk about a specific case, so we don't take a lot of time or anything like that. And so thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. It's incredibly helpful.
I just have a quick question, and that is, once you submitted your request, how do you know what is the time to wait for the request to be actually?
So every request has a different time frame. Once you submit it, you'll get, if you submit it on your mobile app, you'll get a text message that says, thank you for contacting 33311, this is your service request number, and you have 5 SLA days. So, so an SLA is 37. So what happened was 10 years ago, they got all the commissioners together, right? They said, well, how long does it take to fix the problem? How long does it take to fix a light? How long does it take to fix an illegal dumping, right? And they said, come back with this time. The departments went, and, a couple months later, they came back and they said, well, it's going to take me 5 days to fix a street light. It's going to take me 90 days to do a vacant lot. It's going to take us, and so we said, okay, so we have SLA is almost like an MOU, a memo of understanding that you will address this issue within that specific time. Doesn't necessarily mean complete an issue, right? Because you might have something in court, and once it goes to court, it's out of our hands, it's out of everybody's hands but court, right? So, so for every case, there's a different amount of time. And usually they'll tell you what time, right?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there weekend hours? Can you call on the weekend?
No. The time is on there. Our call center is 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to call. But the mobile app is weekend hours.
Quick question, what's your success rate with the 311 program?
With the what?
Your success rate, the percentage of requests you have, and what's your success rate with the program?
That are within SLA days? That would be
because when you established the program, of course, you had a targeted goal on these are the metrics of it is an effective program versus these are metrics that reveal that we're not, being effective.
So I don't have that information. I was only told to bring a 5-minute elevator speech, but if you have my contact, just shoot me an email and I can get you all that information because it's available through open data, and we have it. So how we measure success is by how many calls passed level agreement, right? And then because they have a given time to perform the service, right? So every issue has a different SLA, so you can't cross, right? So we do have a breakup of abandoned autos, vacant lots, and we break all that up. And it's actually available on open data. Everything's in there. And it has
Daniel,
a-
maybe you'd be kind enough then to send us the link to that to Marcel, and we could put it
Yeah.
on our website, and that way folks can easily.
So yeah, we can do that, what I'll do, and then we'll have it for all your meetings, and then have it just, because I plan to have an agent here, every meeting, well, not here, but at your meetings from now on. So we'll have that from now on, now that I know you're interested in it. Okay?
Thank you.
Real last question, are you available for other community RCO religious meetings?
Yes. Yes, that's, yeah,
Cool.
contact.
Perfect.
Thanks very much. So, I assume you are not giving Hans his report? I should, let me rephrase, are you giving Hans his report?
I can give a brief update
Perfect.
on what the PAC has been up to.
Perfect, thank you.
So the PAC has thus far processed 8 new complaints against.
Do you mind either kind of selecting? Yes.
So we have
If you don't
processed
mind.
8 new complaints against police that have been processed and forwarded to internal affairs for investigation. We've also tried to parse out some of the complaints away from investigations when they don't need to be. Sometimes we get calls where the caller needs is help getting service, or maybe they have an issue that really an internal investigation isn't going to solve their problem. So we try to intervene directly, like maybe calling the captain at the district or the lieutenant on duty, or maybe even the officer that they interacted with, and try to get them the service that they feel like they're missing, or answer the question that they need an answer. We've had a lot of success with that, and we've had a lot of success with that because sometimes the answer isn't discipline or an investigation. Sometimes the answer is just, how do I solve my problem? And if we can provide that on some level, then that's what we're trying to do. We've also been interviewing interns for the summer to help us with policy and practice examinations and analysis. We interviewed 3 interns, and we loved all of them. We're only going to get 1, but we would love it if we got all 3. Other than that, can I answer any questions if anyone has any? Shoot.
Why do we only get 1?
Because the intern gods dictated that we were getting 1.
Okay. Is it a paid internship?
No, unpaid.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to share details about the 8 cases that you just talked about?
Well, they were referred to internal affairs, so they have to be investigated first. So probably not, because there are potential victim things going on there, so they would have to be investigated first.
That's 8 cases that are since the last public meeting?
Since the beginning of February.
And these are all against the police department?
Correct. We are. Those aren't the only 8 complaints against police. Those are the 8 that came through us as a conduit.
Anthony, do you know that we had program interns this summer from Drexel's program programs?
We still have one.
Right. Do you want me to contact the coordinator there to see if
I am happy to make as many people as busy as they wish to be.
to see if there's some programmers that would
Sure.
like to?
Sure.
What's your name?
My name's Anthony Arachi. I apologize.
Are you
I'm the chief of staff.
Oh, you're chief, okay, great.
Anthony, what?
Sorry, I failed to introduce you.
I forgot to introduce myself, so it's okay.
Anthony, what?
Arachi.
Arachi.
E-R-A-C-E.
So you would get those complaints from the community?
I would get some of them probably. We have a few other people in the office that would also process them.
So there's a general number, a general email for that, that's on your website?
Yes?
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll take a complaint any way you want to give it. You can fill out a form, we'll do an interview, we'll come out to see you. Mail? Yes, ma'am.
Where are some of the other places that people take complaints about the police?
Directly to the police at Internal Affairs on Dungan Road in the Northeast, any police district, your city councilman's office, and the 311.
311.
And so does a city council person or 311 refer those complaints to you, or do they skip and go to internal affairs?
The answer would be it depends. I think sometimes they're coming to us, sometimes they're going directly to internal affairs. A lot of times we get calls from city council that says, hey, I have this constituent, can you give them a call back? And we absolutely will.
So does the internal affairs make a monthly report about how many people are complaining about police?
Their data is online as far as their complaints. You can check the PPD website and it'll show you a pretty comprehensive list.
So they do?
Yeah, I'm not sure, I don't want to answer for them into how often they update it, but I know it is.
Well, all right, forget monthly, but
Yeah.
they do
But yes.
report. Okay.
Are you still the only investigator
No, there's, we have 3 total.
with PAC?
Yeah.
So in addition to you, it's 3 or you no
So,
longer?
no, 3, including me.
Okay.
But we all wear a bunch of different hats, so it's.
Please.
Are you the person to ask about the request for a larger budget for PAC and the city council in the mayor's budget?
It depends on your question. I do not have the ability to grant us money, or I would grant us an awful lot. But I can try to answer your question if you have it.
I don't know.
That comes from the city council.
Right, the money, the budget comes from the mayor, but the money comes from city council.
Well, the
So
money
should-
comes from the taxpayer.
Right. So
Yes, that's
both,
true.
Both the administration and city council have been very supportive of the PAC, and
And
we
of
do
this
anticipate some growth.
of this new budget
Yes, ma'am.
amount?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, I'm not sure what the hard and fast number is going to be, but we'll be growing.
We're anticipating increase in the allocation for PAC in the budget, and I think that we'll hear from our executive director most likely at the next meeting on his ideas on how best to utilize that funding.
Okay, my other question is that back in September, Curtis Jones and somebody else who I've forgotten submitted a resolution to city council asking for an increased budget for PAC and also independence for PAC. And I was wondering if you knew or could comment on what that actually means, independence for PAC.
Well, there has been discussion over the years about PAC becoming a permanent agency. Right now, it operates by an executive order. And so there's various discussions about what it would mean for the organization to be permanent, and that's part of the current legislation, proposed legislation, that it be permanent. There's also discussions about ballot initiatives for it to be permanent. I think that, again, I want to defer to Hans to state his agenda for the organization and for the group as a whole to look at the initiatives. So I think I'll stop.
Okay.
But just, I can do a clarification. So
Please.
just so everyone knows, PAC's budget technically is under, what she meant by executive order. If the mayor says, I don't like PAC anymore, we're gone. And so what the vote really means is that we're going to become a permanent agency where someone can't just kick us out if they don't feel like it. Just to clarify, so the first thing, because there's a lot of layers of what's going on right now. So the first thing is they said like a $500,000 budget. That's what everybody heard in the news and things of that nature. What they're saying is at the very least, that should be PAC's budget going forward with no questions asked. Believe it or not, that actually got approved in council, and so it should be on the next, I'm not sure if it's this ballot or next year's ballot.
May ballot.
May ballot for sure? Okay, well there you go. May's ballot to where you vote on it, and the city, as a citywide, as the city, they'll vote to say, do y'all agree or disagree that PAC should be allocated a budget? That's the next step in that process.
But in the meantime,
Right.
money is going to be allocated. We're not going to wait for that to get more money.
We got a
to
feeling that it is, but again, I'm not the powers that be, so I'm not going to be able to say
Okay.
yes or no, but that's been kind of like the positive talk.
Okay.
We're anticipating that increase to the budget and to be spent along certain initiatives. Please.
So a lot of callers on the radio station call in, and we have constant conversations about the authority and the powers of this body here. And a lot of people are frustrated. One of the frustrations was that you guys needed a larger operating budget, and that's being addressed. The second main concern is that you're limited in your powers because the vast majority of the frustration is one, the internal affairs. That's police investigating police. Good luck with that one. with you guys, that's why there was the necessity to have you guys, an independent governing body. So a lot of people call to find out legislatively what can be done to give you guys the authority to do more than make recommendations, to do more than make suggestions, actually say, hey, this right here is a fallacy. You know, this officer needs to be brought up on charges. People are steaming and fuming about the fact that we have a list that we actually know of that officers are deemed do not call, and no one other than journalists and radio personalities, and of course, Kiera Bradford Gray at the Chief Defender's Office, the only ones calling it out. The mayor hasn't denounced this list. Of course, Krasner has, but the public is like, if you care about us and you want to make sure that we are safe, not safe from predators, but safe from predators and badges, right? Why isn't anyone denouncing this, saying that this is a public outrage and a complete embarrassment and not representation of the city of Philadelphia?
Let's go back in pieces, because there was a lot of questions in there. So one, more money, but not necessarily efficient, right? So we have even more money to the PAC. There are, with Anthony, 3 investigators. Internal Affairs has 150?
Somewhere around there.
So in terms of volume. Second, in terms of powers, yeah. I mean, it's the executive order, the mayor, our current mayor, and all the mayors before him, well, a few mayors before him, have determined the limits on PAC's authority. If the public thinks that the PAC needs to have greater authority and kind of balances things up a bit, then let your city council people hear that, right? That's where that momentum has to start. It's a city event, has to come from city council on the ballot for greater authority. I mean, we couldn't agree more. So that's that piece. And the third piece, in terms of the list, never having worked at the district attorney's office, I don't know that that list was intended for the public. I don't know if it shouldn't be intended for the public. I think that there's a lot of issues on that. And if we see the stories in the paper, there seems to be a whole lot of inconsistencies on who got on the list and why. Should they remain on the list? Should there be other people on the list? So I'm not sure what position that the PAC has about the list. I think it verifies some, pardon?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I think that it reinforces some of the ideas that we all have about officers and about some of the officers. I'm not sure how we proceed with that list.
But let me just say this. It's the fact that, one, there is a list, okay? We should start with that there is a list. Not that, you know, this officer should be on the list, the officer should. The fact that it exists is an outrage, right? And we haven't heard anything from this body of people saying, hey, wait, list, do not call, say something. Like the public, what I'm saying is, callers call in all the time. And it's just like, okay, who's speaking for us, right? No one has publicly denounced that list other than Kiera Bradford Gray and Larry Krasner. No one.
Denounce the list?
Why do you want to denounce the list? Isn't the list a good thing to make sure that officers who aren't credible don't take the stand in the case?
Denounce the fact that it's been, that there's one, that there is one, two, that these officers continue with their job. Let me just say, for example, if I were a city council person, I wouldn't wait for the mayor to say anything. I would host a public, a press conference and say to my constituents, today we found out that this exists. We will not stop until it's investigated and we get to the bottom of it, and we assure that any officer on this list will be removed from the streets and you will be safe from these predators. That's what I would do as a leader.
And I think that's an accurate perception, because the list is in fact a product of the inability to deal with officers the way they should be dealt with when they commit, you know, when they lie on the stand, when they've developed a reputation, or when there's actual evidence of misconduct. You can't fire them, they're back on the force. Prosecutors, I believe, were left with no alternative but to develop a list and to try to do what's right for the public.
I mean, it all comes back to that entire problem with discipline, right? If there was a way that when those officers, you saw there's bad conduct, there was a way to get them off the force, there wouldn't have been a need for the list.
So can I?
I'm sorry.
My apologies for interrupting you. Can I backtail on her point? It sounds like from the gentleman's reflection that the issue centers around pretty much the union and contract in the city of Philadelphia with the Philadelphia Police Department. Are you all engaged in the police contract negotiations based on the complaints that the citizens have to say those items that should be coming out with lawyers that may be pro bono to work on your behalf to get it eliminated so we can see what needs to be done?
We have no authority to do that. In our executive order, there's no authority to do that.
Have you
But I
asked?
think as
Have you asked
asked
to
what?
participate in the union contract negotiation on behalf of the citizenry of Philadelphia?
This commission just formed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it
I'm
just
ahead.
started in October, and the negotiations for that contract were long overdue.
My apologies.
So-
Okay,
But
Yeah.
can I, Mr. King, please respond, because we have had internal discussions
fair enough.
about what you just said. Because I did find out, for instance, Councilman Jones, who was chair of Public Safety, was not invited or did not know about the negotiations with the police contract.
But the mayor knew.
The mayor knows. All right. So there was, once again, in some discussion, folks can agree to me to say this, that we believe that this commission, as well as council, needs to be, there definitely needs to be much more transparent with the negotiating of that contract. But it's not up until what, 2 years from now?
3 years.
2.5.
But as you and I know, the pre-negotiations are starting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well,
So that's the reason I put them into it.
And I'd just like to comment too, when you raised about, the chair raised about, if we do push for a charter change to give more power to this commission, part of that charter change has to be who would serve on the commission and who's appointing those folks to serve on the commission. And let me just say this. I'm on the mayor's commission of African American mayor, which I pushed for the charter change. We successfully have a charter change to create a commission of African American mayors. But everybody on that commission is appointed by the mayor. And I'm not saying it's a good thing or bad thing. It's not, it's just a good friend, Mayor Kenny. But I would say if we push for a charter change to give more power to the police commission, we probably need to be advisor and be a commission. And that commission should be appointed by the mayor and council, appointments by the mayor and the council. To me, that would give it more teeth. And I'm just recommending that. Now, how that would happen, we would have to find somebody in council who champions the commission. And right now, the two people are Councilman Clark and Councilman Jones.
Thank you. Please.
I know this is all just, I know there's the rest of the agenda, but I wanted to add to, well, I have a question, and then I also just wanted to add to the comments that people have made, but how often can your charter be renegotiated? I mean, could that happen at any time?
The executive order, you mean?
I guess so.
The
I mean,
PAC executive, so Mayor Kinney revised the executive order. He
Like if
changed
we
the
were
number
to-
of members, he changed the appointment process.
Right.
So we serve at the pleasure of each.
Right, right. And so I know we're always saying that because it has this kind of temporary status. And so if we were to organize around and to push for this permanent status and to also push for rewriting the charter to give it more teeth, like does that have to be voted on, or so would that have to wait until like the next election?
I think
You know what I'm
that
saying?
I think there.
Just trying to
I
understand.
was gonna say there's multiple layers in your question, so it's
Yeah.
not just one quick answer.
Okay.
But when it comes to executive order, the mayor, if he wanted to, he can change our executive order every day. So just to get that in a thought process, if he wanted us to,
Mhm.
you get that moving on. So the next layer of that is, if you think about you're talking about making us more permanent. There's so many hands in the pot because we're already having a vote to become permanent. And that's also going to change a little bit about what we do, and then that means council will have to kind of set some ramifications. Again, that's above and pay grade, so I'll just leave it at that. I forget there's a third part I wanted to say.
So I'll just add that, you know, we are a creature of the executive order, so any authority we have derives from that order. Even our IOPs have to recognize that our authority is limited by the constraints of the executive order. In some cities, the police commissions are investigatory commissions, and they have full powers to conduct, you know, a full-blown investigation. We do not. We're more in the nature of an auditing group that can make, you know, that can give advice and make recommendations. But any change, right, would have to come from the citizens of Philadelphia in terms of, you know, by vote or otherwise.
Right.
Because right now, we are defined and our authority is limited by executive order.
Right. I totally get all of that. Melissa, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you know, I guess it's kind of unfortunate for us, but fortunate, because next year is 2019, so now would be the time to start leveraging our demands. We're gonna run elections for city council people and the mayor. Now would be the time to say, this is what we want in our city, or you will not be mayor again, and you will no longer be city council. I think so many times, so often, people forget the power lies in the hands of the people. We give these people permission to serve us, and they forget, and we forget.
Thank you. Please.
Could we, in order to have a new commission, we have to change the city charter?
Not the city charter, the executive order.
Okay, but the resolution that's been introduced into city council is asking for the police advisory commission to be independent. Is that the same thing as a independent agency?
It's a funding resolution.
It's
primarily.
just
It's-
funding?
Yes, we're not going to be an independent part of government. It's a floor funding resolution. So that means that we would have floor funding of $500,000 a year. Now that doesn't limit our funding, that's just the floor of our funding.
It means
So
that it will be assured.
So what does
Right,
the word
right.
independent mean? That's
It means
where
the funding will be assured, so it's just a
Oh,
funding
okay.
issue.
But so to do everything that Mr. Qayyum suggested would be a matter of,
That would require one of two things. That would require a change, in theory, of the executive order that gave us different abilities.
right,
Or a legislative act that created.
the City Council Legislative Act creating a new agents commission,
Or
freestanding
Or
commission.
expanding this one, I mean.
Or, I mean, this one, but making it giving it a fundamentally different nature.
Making it both permanent and expanding the range of our abilities.
Which would have to
And-
be a charter change.
And that would take it out from under the mayor and actually get rid of the executive order.
Yes.
Okay. And that's city council.
Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
yes.
But what,
In case you didn't hear, our guest in the front said, and that's a complicated process.
but just one more piece of clarification. Can the mayor, in his existing executive order, give this body the authority to investigate complaints?
Yes.
Yes.
And he has not? Or, no, I'm
Not
sorry, the
exactly.
executive order has not.
The executive order, the last executive order, the most recent executive order came out in February of last year.
2017.
And it lays out all of the authority of this commission.
And we do have, there is some limited investigatory privilege, let's say. So if PAC believes that an investigation is going to be indicative, let's say, of a pattern or practice, then PAC is free to conduct that investigation. But the idea is to uncover or produce information or advice or recommendations concerning policies and practices.
What?
So in other words, if an individual investigation is likely to lead to evidence of policy or practice that needs to be reformed, for example, then that investigation can be undertaken. But generally, the idea is more to audit the investigations that have been done, to reveal policies or practices that might be reformed.
But again, the base of my question is, does the mayor, who quote unquote lives by best practices across the United States through the Council of Mayors or whatever the global entity is for mayors across the United States, does he have the power to give you authorization to investigate complaints at a level that is similar to those who have independent police advisory commissions? He does.
I would argue that we have that authority now, but let's look at this in reality. So we have the authority to look at anything that could be indicative of a trend. Well, a trend starts with one, right? You gotta start somewhere. The other issue is we can do anything we want with our $500,000. Well, how much can we do with our $500,000? And while that doesn't sound like an insignificant number in terms of staffing and all the other resources, if we compare that to internal affairs with their 150 investigators and our 3 stellar, competent investigators.
I follow you on the poverty line. I follow you. But again, if we put pressure on him and his office, he has the authority to make that change. He has the authority to make the budgetary change to complement that. Without any charter change, without anything going to the folks to vote for, he can do that tomorrow.
And
The
change it the
funding, I
next
believe,
day.
has to go through
The
city
council, no, I understand,
Yeah, but,
but he could do that tomorrow.
so I think, but I want to be clear. So the answer is yes, he's the mayor. But I want to be clear that the investigative ability, I maintain that we have now. Just without any money, we can't do it, right? So it's a distinction. If we wanted to investigate all of the complaints in Philadelphia tomorrow, Anthony could start up tomorrow morning. How he's going to cover that overtime, how he's going to cover everything else, it's a problem. So it's not the lack of authority, it's the lack of resources.
So if the community found a group of law firms that had investigators, locally or nationally, that was willing to give those negotiators to this commission pro bono to investigate specific cases of complaints, you could take those investigators and go forward further than what you're doing now, to do it at the same level as would be required or is required under other police advisory commissions that have that authority.
I can't speak to what the city would permit in terms of outside investigators. If you ask your question slightly different, we've got this collective of law firms that want to do the right thing, and they bring a bucket of money, and the PAC hires investigators. That seems more likely than the city allowing outside investigators to come in.
Okay. Okay.
I just wanted, I think what I was, the third point I was thinking about earlier, kind of in relation to the comments that Melissa and this gentleman are making. I think what's tough is often, you know, these meetings are kind of the only venue for, like, I think often the audience that we're talking to is not really y'all, right? Like our frustration right now, for example, it's incredibly frustrating, right? That we're not able to say these things to the mayor. The mayor certainly does not give us the venue to do those things, right? And like some of the council people, like Councilman Jones, is not invited to the, you know, it's like, and just even finding out information. I know I've been emailing with some of you in this room, you know, like just trying to get a copy of like the full city contract has been an experience, right? Like I've called some different city, and I finally got a copy from Campaign Zero, because they had one on file as opposed to having to go, you know, so I think like, I feel like when sometimes the things that we're saying, I think y'all, maybe in some ways you agree with us, like you would love to have more staff, you would love to have more powers as well. And I guess I just want to say, like, I think when we're asking all these questions, like we're just trying to clarify for ourselves, like how do we even do this? Because the other thing that I hear from y'all as well is like, yes, like I think, and I know we say this a lot, I've said this often when I come here, like I think we are committed to doing some of this work, but like finding out the information is really tough. And I'm not a lawyer, you know, and I think all of us have full-time jobs or maybe multiple full-time jobs. And so I think sometimes like and I know that, that Hans has sometimes said like, you know, it just seems like there are different he wants this body to appear neutral in the sense that if it's auditing investigations, that it's doing its job, right? That it's not like anti-cop. And I understand that. But I think, I don't want to put words in Melissa's mouth, but when you were talking, what I was thinking of too is like, I think sometimes what some of us are looking for here is like, yeah, just a body to say like, we're with you, or we're here to help you to do some of this. Like, not to help us organize, but at least to help us get the information that we need to organize much more effectively, if that makes sense.
And just to be in the pursuit of justice, and just to be exactly what she's saying, it's not about being anti-cop and for the people. It's about a governing body that wants to pursue justice, right? And whatever that looks like, right? But right is right and wrong is wrong. And be it man on the street or police officer, breaking the law is just breaking the law, you know? Most people should be brought to justice, and if they are found guilty, instead of people every day being angry at the police, being angry at the mayor, being angry at city council, and having no clue, right, that they should go to their state legislatures, right, and say, hey, this arbitration process is failed, and we want to change, or we won't re-elect you. The average Joe on the street has no clue of the path to get the results that they desire. They just don't know. They don't have time to come here. I hustled from my job to get here, right? So most people, I mean, we announced it on the radio yesterday that we were having it here, but most people just can't make it because they're just trying to make ends meet and trying to take care of their families.
Right. And we appreciate you coming out. I mean, we obviously share your concerns, right? We are all at our day jobs. We came here. We come when we want to meet with folks and hear what they're thinking and share whatever information we have. And, you know, as a collective voice, we are stronger than an individual voice. All right. Any questions? Please.
Thank you. I really appreciate how open everybody is in your group. But I still have the same question, which is, can the Police Advisory Commission help a group of citizens or an individual citizen to get information relating to the, well, let's just say, the police contract? Are you a group of people that I could approach and say, how do I get the FOP contract? Or is there no place or someplace else? Do you see that as a job you do or not as a job you do?
So we don't have any greater access to that information than you do. I mean, that's kind of the painful reality. We have limited, not limited beyond investigation, but we have limited authority in the executive order. So if I were to call Commissioner Ramsey's, Commissioner Ross's office, I don't have any greater authority to request that information than any other taxpayer in Philadelphia.
But if you do give us a call, I'd be happy to try to help you.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you very much.
And you have a copy.
What?
You have a copy.
I do have a copy. I'm happy to share that with anyone. I actually remember to bring business cards tonight. So I have my contact information on them, yeah.
Did you want to respond?
We're just debating that we believe, it's my belief that because the contract is not with the police department, it's on behalf of the police department. So it's the FOP and the city of Philadelphia. And it's a contract with the city of Philadelphia. We believe that at some point there should be, it's public knowledge of what it is. But it's not the individual. If it's just like with the rec department or the streets department, they negotiate with their union and the city. So it's those two those two entities.
Well, also it's out in the open right now. I mean, somebody has a copy of it. Somebody could post it online and let anybody who wanted to download it.
Yeah. I posted it as soon as the ink was dry.
Great.
You should be.
So yes, I believe it's public information because it is with the city of Philadelphia.
It's just that it's unfortunate that, you know, at the time that the negotiations started, I mean, I remember seeing an article saying that it was the last day, and people were like, wait, what? And it's like, I feel like we were deceived, because it's the mayor's responsibility to say, City of Philadelphia, this is what's taking place, what's your input, how do you feel, right? Because we should have a voice in this, but we didn't. It was swept in the rug, and it was, you know, it seemed like a backroom deal, and that's really unfortunate.
Yes, I mean, no one tagged us in either. I saw the same article.
Right.
It's happening now. Matt, you were saying you should be able to get the information.
I would think if no one would give it to you directly, a right-to-know request.
It was posted online by the mayor's office when it was announced. And yeah, if no one will give it to you, you can file a right-to-know request.
Yeah, so we're clarifying, Austin, right?
My name's Austin. I'm a journalist with The Declaration. It's also on our website if you go back to one of our stories from August.
There's two contracts technically, like there's one that doesn't have any meat in it.
There's the it's an arbitration ruling, and the mayor posted it online when it was.
Is that the one that you sent me?
That's the one I sent you way back when.
Yeah, so there's one that's like
one.
13 pages, and there's one that's like 100-something pages.
Right.
So the one that I have is 100-something pages.
Well, there's the arbitration ruling, and then there's sort of an unofficial collected version that is put together by the FOP or by the city based on kind of the pileup of arbitrations. That one is a little bit harder to get, but you can find it.
So I guess I think all we're saying though is like, it sounds like it's out there, but as just a citizen who is concerned about, you know, I mean, I think like there's, like transparency is not just, yes, technically it's available, it's like outside under this rock, you dig like 10 feet down, you know, and all you have to do is ask the one person in the city that knows where it is. Like that's not transparency, right? So I just think like when we're saying things are available, like they should be easily available to people of all abilities, right? And all technologies. Yeah, so I mean, I just want to push back against that a little bit. Like, if I spend like 3 or 4 days trying to find something and it's really hard to find, and maybe I'm not doing a good job searching, but I'm just saying, like, you know, it's not. And when I did email the right to know, and I have gotten like a series of emails back that like nobody just said like, oh yeah, here it's right here. Right. So anyway, I just, you know, I'm not like no blame, but just it's not easy to find.
I think it's all helpful. Other questions for Anthony? Okay. We want to move on to, we have a presentation by Lieutenant Steve Nolan.
I walked up here just like Daniel did.
At least I got your name right.
Good evening, and thanks for having me here today. My name is Steve Nolan. I'm a lieutenant with the Philadelphia Police Department. A little bit of background for me. I have 37 years with the police department. I'm scheduled to retire this September. For the last 20 years, I've investigated just police shooting incidents. So 18 of those with the Internal Affairs Division. The last 2 years, about a year and a half going on 2 years, it's with a new unit called the Officer Involved Shooting Investigation Unit.
I'm sorry?
The Officer Involved Shooting Investigation Unit. In 2013, the Philadelphia Police Department had a high number of police shootings in the month of May. Normally, it would be an average about 4 or 5 police shootings. This one particular month, there was about 14 police shootings in 2013, May of 2013. The commissioner at the time was Charles Ramsey. He had asked the Department of Justice to come in and look at the police department's use of force, how we train, how we investigate. And the Department of Justice gave us 90-some recommendations that they wanted to see implemented. One of those recommendations was, because I was part of the old Internal Affairs shooting team, what that meant back then was that as a lieutenant on the shooting team, anytime a police officer, Philadelphia police officer, discharged a firearm, whether theirs or suspects or friends or whoever, it was investigated by Internal Affairs and some divisional detectives. So that means that if a police officer got involved in a shooting at 19th and Diamond Street, Steve Nolan from Internal Affairs would go to the scene, and some detectives from Central Detectives would meet me out here, and I would direct them as to what I need done. What the Department of Justice said was you should have a group, you should have 2 investigations going on at the same time. You should have what's called a criminal investigation and an administrative investigation. Criminal investigation would be a select group of detectives who are specially trained in an officer-involved shooting incident and how it should be investigated. And the administrative group should be looking at the officer's actions departmentally. So did the officer follow all the guidelines of the department? That would be the administrative side. The criminal investigative unit would just look at the criminality of everybody involved in the shooting incident, the officer or any citizens. And that criminal investigative unit would just coordinate with the district attorney's office. The internal affairs division would not. They would simply look at the officer's actions and weigh it against what departmental issues there might be. So when this unit came about, this officer-involved shooting investigation unit, I was asked to handle that, to head that. So it's myself as a lieutenant, I have a sergeant and 6 detectives. I've trained them, and I do training around on the East Coast to other police departments on investigating a police shooting incident, how it should be investigated, what to make sure you don't miss, what things are germane to the incident, basically anything and everything related to the incident. The same group of detectives that I now oversee, you have the same group of detectives doing the investigation, which means I don't have a couple detectives that they sent to me this time, and then next week I have 2 other detectives from a different part of the city who might be bums. I might get a good detective come out, I might get a bum detective come out. I have 6 good detectives now who I've trained, and I told them, here's what I want you to do. To me, it's an advantage. But basically, that's the new process. So if a police shooting happened now, my unit would go out and investigate it. The Internal Affairs Division would send one of their investigators, because they have to know what's going on, because they're going to have to question the officer at some point. My unit would be responsible to do all the legwork, which would be track down any witnesses, knocking on doors, getting any and all video, getting all radio tapes, anything that's relevant to the incident, my unit would be responsible to get. And we would give all of that to the district attorney's office. And then the district attorney's office at some point would make a decision as to are there any criminal charges warranted against anybody involved in the incident. Does that, any questions so far about anything I've said?
Now, as far as I understand, one of the reasons for separating the 2 was so that you could speed up, so that internal affairs could speed up interviews and criminal wouldn't have to wait for a long time to send the file to the district attorney. Have you, since the separation, have you been able to send reports or referrals to the district attorney more quickly than in the past?
Kind of what your question is, there's a little bit, they're kind of intertwined. Before, what would happen is, under the old system, Steve Nolan as an internal affairs investigator, we would wear both hats. So we put the criminal hat on when I'm doing the investigation in the here and now. The district attorney's office would look at everything, and at some point they would say to the police department, office, we've looked at everything regarding Officer Smith's discharge, there's no criminal charges warranted. Now Steve Nolan put on the administrative hat and call Officer Smith in, which oftentimes was 5 months, 6 months, a year later, which is ludicrous. This is not a knock at George. I know George from the DA's office, and he was on the part of that panel that put this together too. But they had to wait for everything. So you weren't talking to the most important person in the event for some time later, and that was just crazy. So this new process is my unit will look at everything, give everything to the DA's office. The Internal Affairs Division will now take Officer Smith 3 days after his shooting and will take what's called a compelled interview from him, which means simply that. They call Officer Smith in after 3 days and say, Officer Smith, you're one of our employees. You have to tell us what you did regarding your actions on such and such a date. Nothing you say to us in this interview can be used against you, okay? And here's the reason for that. Steve Nolan, as a police officer, I'm a government employee. So I'm in a unique position. And I didn't say I'm a special person. I said I'm in a unique position. A police officer is a unique position. They are an employee of the government. They could be a witness to a crime. They could be a victim of a crime. And we're training them, the police department, to go out there and protect you and you and you and you and me. So they have a special function. So they're an employee, but they also may use force against somebody, which could take somebody's liberty or life away from them. So the police department has to be able to say, hey, we need to know, Steve Nolan, what you did when you fired your gun. Now it's being done in a timely fashion, so the police department gets that interview. The other part of your question was, if I got it right, the district attorney's office won't get that interview while the officer's under investigation. because it's a compelled interview. I'm being told to give this interview because I'm an employee of Philadelphia Police Department. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions on that?
I have a question.
Yes.
So if the DA wants to file charges, then the interview is still not available because it's compelled?
The interview couldn't be used against the officer. So the officer, Steve Nolan, can be involved in the shooting, and I get interviewed 3 days after the incident, and a week later, District Attorney Krasner says, we're gonna lock up Steve Nolan. He can lock up Steve Nolan, but he can't have this interview. He can't use this against me in court.
Right.
He can't get this interview and say, Steve Nolan said A, B, and C. Because I was told when I gave this interview that I'm giving it because I'm an employee of the government and they want to talk to me. My employer wants to know what happened.
So if that's the case, how could you ever get to the bottom of the shooting if the officer is protected by his status, right? An incident takes place, it's investigated by the district attorney's office, right? How are you ever going to get to the bottom of the truth if you never ever can access the words of the officer and the actions that he took during the discharge of his firearm? You can interview him
You can get to
again.
the truth by other means, and that's
Also-
usually putting together everything else that you have. By that I mean, it's kind of like going to 19th and Diamond where the shooting happened. Now I have puzzle pieces that I have to put together. So I'm going to put all these puzzle pieces together as best I can, and I'm going to give them to the DA's office. And they would have, even though they don't have Steve Nolan's interview per se, they can have a reasonable degree of certainty of what took place there and whether Steve Nolan violated any statutes of the Commonwealth. So they can answer this question.
So if that's the case, in the situation with the officer Pownell, right? He shot the gentleman, Carney Williams, who's now paralyzed in a chair. He killed David Jones. He was also listed on that list of 29 officers do not call. So, two questions. One, how long has your unit been active?
Since 2017, late 2016, but we officially started 2017, January 1st.
So after, this incident happened with this officer, I guess my question is, how can we as the public be confident in your team to investigate shootings and get to the bottom and bring about justice? Because in this situation, it was an outcry and outrage from the public that had that case removed from the DA's office up to Josh Shapiro. How can we be confident in your investigative ability if the public had to take to the streets?
It's a valid question, and my answer to that is this, and it's the same one that I put in an article and I put together, is I've been investigating shootings for 20 years, police shootings. Everybody in this room could say, well, I don't know you, Steve Nolan. You're a police officer. You're investigating your fellow officer's shooting. I don't trust you. That's your opinion. I understand that. For me personally, I've had to arrest, just by my count, 8 police officers. Not a pleasant thing to do, but I say that to say, well, let the chips fall where they may. Wherever the shooting takes me, that's where I'm going to go. I'm not going to say, you know what, as I said, I have 37 years old. I'm not going to lose my job because of what another officer did. So I'm going to take everything that I have and I'm going to give it to the district attorney's office, which is a checks and balance, and the police advisory commission, which also is involved in the process too. So you have a checks and balance in place. That would be my answer to the question. It may not suffice for you, but that's the best process you could have. The worst thing you could have, my belief, is to have somebody come in to say, we want independent people to investigate this. Because unless you've been doing it for a while, and I don't say that to pat Steve Nolan on the back up, he's wonderful. I say that because you don't want to miss anything. You only get one shot at doing this. So you want to have it done right. As to whether you trust me or not, I can't change that. That would just happen over time.
It's not an issue of trust, it's an issue of who you guys are. You guys, blue collar, you guys are all in the same union. You're in the same union as the guy you're investigating. You're not in a different union. Same one. You go to the same place in the Northeast to drink beer with them on the weekends.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not an issue about trusting you, it's an issue of your relationships. And we know from our own experiences in life, we give favors to people we know. We give breaks to people we know. And from our experience in the neighborhood, that's all your police department's done. For police shooting, so no, we don't trust you, but it's an issue of Give us the power to investigate on top of your investigation, period. I wonder if the Justice Department put that in their recommendations.
I wanted to ask a clarification question. So I understand about this being compelled to give a statement by your employer and like why that wouldn't be used, but I heard you say there are two investigations that take place and one is a criminal and one is an administrative.
Yes, ma'am.
And so is there no statement that's taken as part of the criminal investigation?
There's no statement that's taken that, I can't compel an officer to give me a statement. In fact, that officer who's involved in a shooting, they're told that night, you can give an interview, you can give a voluntary interview to my unit, the criminal investigative unit.
So is that because I get, like, so if I'm at the scene of a shooting and as a citizen, I can be compelled.
No, you can't.
No, you can't. And that's why, and you just kind of answered the question, and I'll use that. If you discharge the weapon right now.
Because I could get a lawyer and say, I'm not going to answer any questions.
No,
correct.
you could just say, I'm not gonna answer without a lawyer.
Once you squeeze the trigger of a firearm, whether a police officer or a citizen, you've now employed deadly force. Even though maybe you fired the gun and you missed everybody, but you've used deadly force. So that action has to be looked at by the district attorney's office. You now become the subject of a criminal investigation. You have rights.
I see what you're saying. So I guess my other question is maybe less about the specifics, but I know at other town hall meetings I've been to and kind of what I've heard here from other people's experiences in the room, how often have y'all, so when you're doing these investigations, how often, I know you just started in 2017, but I guess your experience before this this new division was started, have y'all found people responsible but you're unable to fire them because of the contract?
Not so much my unit, it goes back to the police department. I'm sure everybody's been reading the paper with just the way the system is, where it's hard to get rid of a bad apple in the police department. So to answer that question, it's not for Steve Nolan to even be in that realm, but obviously for the police department, and we can all see what those issues are.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
One of the criticisms in the cops report was that they said that, you know, the shooting teams, there were some very good investigators, some median investigators, and some investigators, you know, they went and looked at a couple different reports and said some of these are lacking very important stuff. As the commander of the new criminal investigation unit, have you been able to create like a standard set of requirements for every investigation that each one of your detectives has to meet?
Yes, and I agreed with those findings that they put in those recommendations. And in fact, when Ellen Green Seisler, who's now a judge, she did a report years ago, who I took around to different police shootings, I agreed with some of her recommendations and some of her findings as well. And I felt that, and that's, again, it's a tough thing to say about a fellow employee, whether it's a police officer on the street or somebody who I work with at Internal Affairs, who I felt weren't doing the best. And again, I don't say that to say, well, Steve Nolan's all that, and he's wonderful. Somebody could say, well, I don't like what Steve Nolan did in this investigation. But to answer your question, yeah, there's now a template that I put in place just based on my years of experience and the courses that I teach along those lines to say, for a police shooting to happen, this is what should happen. You should be doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, all those things. Before, it wasn't happening. It was hit or miss depending on who the investigator was.
Your team consists of how many investigators?
It's myself, a sergeant, and then 6 detectives.
6 detectives. What's your demographic makeup with race and age diversity?
They're all males. There's a black male, there's a Hispanic male, and 4 white males.
Is there anything wrong with that?
I don't see anything wrong with it if I had the best investigators.
There's no females at all. You have one.
Would you want me to have a female who maybe not is the best investigator, or would you want the best investigator?
I get that. I definitely get we want the best, most competent, and most confident. We do. But you have 6 that, well, not being, how large is your investigative file? I know you have like 65, how many officers are in the city of
There's about 6,300 officers.
6,300. So of that 6,300, how many account for your investigative teams across the city?
Detectives.
The detectives, yeah.
Well, there's 6 detectives, a sergeant, and a lieutenant, so it would be amongst that group, whatever the detective.
Oh, in the whole police force, how many detectives are there?
Probably about 400 detectives.
That is highly problematic that out of 400, you can only find 4 competent white men,
It is.
1 competent black man, and 1 competent Latino man, you say?
I agree.
You got to realize who the police department is becoming now.
Oh, we're talking about New Nesby?
No.
I'm sorry.
Who's going through
The training.
the training, right? In 5 years, if this process continues, we will see almost 100% white police in the city of Philadelphia.
That's frightening because I went to the FOP for the first time in my life on one of my campaigns. And I'll have to share it with you. I'm a veteran of the United States Army, so I've backpacked in the woods with men and spent a lot of time with people from all over the country and the world. And I'm not easily intimidated. But the day that I walked into the FOP, I stood amongst over 700 white men. I was the only black female in the room, and I probably could count the amount of white females that I saw in the room. And I asked my candidate, I said, "This is the Philadelphia Police Department?" He looked at me and said, "Yes." I said, "Dear God, this is the problem in Philadelphia. That is the problem. The United States of America is not white males. And if we don't talk about it, if we don't address it, if we don't acknowledge it, we will go nowhere. It's equivalent to a dog chasing its tail." And as long as we have people in leadership like the guy Nesby that says things like people need to be put down like rabid animals, that is the most toxic and disturbing words that anyone in a position of leadership could ever say. So if we don't start at the top, we're going nowhere quickly. So if we're not genuine in our actions, then this is all a waste of time.
Please, more for the commission. I know that I think I came in just as you were talking about, I think you were gonna be forming committees, and we'll be hearing more about that next month. And I know that I've been very interested in the contract and having a committee that's gonna look at the contract. I'm wondering if there's gonna be a committee that's looking at recruiting practices?
So we're going to be meeting next week to look at our agenda and look at what the initiatives for the coming year should be. So I can report back more fully, like what the commission has looked at, determined their agenda, what Hans has looked at, and I think we want to hear from you.
And I do remind everyone, you can always email PAC@phil.gov. I'll make sure you get a response within 24 hours.
Every day.
Every day.
I would like to make a comment to your question. There is for at least a couple of years now, the effort in the African American community to recruit more black police officers. Most folks don't want to join it because they hate police. I mean, I got to say that. But there's this stigma in the black community. They do not want to come on the police force, particularly among a lot of black males. And there's some other issues too about requirements and stuff like that. And that's what that Commissioner Ross did when he took away the requirement that you got to have at least 2 years college credits. He took it out. That knocked a lot of folks out. So there is some changes, but there is a general feeling that, in the black community that the police are the enemy, unfortunately. But so you got to keep promoting it, and we did talk about it. Good job about how to really push recruitment.
And 2 quick questions. Does your department look at all at shootings that occur in a domestic situation where an officer is present, but maybe it's classified initially as a suicide, or there's, it's unclassified? Do you look at shootings like that, or simply where you do have evidence that a police shot?
My unit only investigates police-involved discharges, so police officers on duty or off duty, and we investigate suicides as well of a police officer, or if it's a domestic incident off duty. Say if an officer is involved.
So if the officer's gun was involved in the shooting in the household, then you do?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then my second question is, I understand the compel interview can't be used, but if you have a situation where the officer then waives his constitutional rights and gives a statement in the criminal investigation, is it ever admissible for impeachment purposes if it's inconsistent?
It would be. If an officer gave an interview at that point, if he gave a voluntary interview, that interview is open to whatever use, whether it's criminal or administrative.
So then it becomes admissible for impeachment
Yes,
purposes?
ma'am.
Okay.
I think a question, or maybe a follow-up question. If the officer gives a statement in a compelled testimony, and then testifies, say, you know, waives his Fifth Amendment rights and testifies in court, and what he says is contrary to what he said in a compelled interview, does that open up the compelled interview to, introduction as evidence in the
For
criminal
use at the criminal trial.
I haven't run across yet, but I would think it would, yes. I would think if he's saying one thing in his compelled interview, which it would now...
But then the question would be, who would know that? Like, who would see the compelled interview transcript and know, oh, well, what he said in the courtroom is different from that, so now I'm going to hand this over to the DA's office or to the defense counsel.
Once the district attorney's office said there's no criminal charges warranted against the officer, then that statement, in a sense, becomes released, where it doesn't have to have that protection of a compelled interview.
But I mean, if there is actually a criminal proceeding, like the, even if there's if the officer's charged criminally and tried, at that point, does the compelled interview remains out? It's not seen by the district attorney or by the officer's own lawyer. Is that right?
In all likelihood, if I understand your question right, in all likelihood, if an officer is going to be charged with something, he's already given that compelled interview. That compelled interview won't be given to the district attorney's office, couldn't be given to the district attorney's office because it was taken under the Garrity regulations, and nothing that officer said could be used against him. Getting back to the, you have an individual having rights. And I know it sounds convoluted and it sounds like, what does he mean by that? These are all things that have been in place, not only in the Philadelphia Police Department, but in most other jurisdictions in terms of the way the setup is. It might be slightly different, but it's pretty much they follow the same format.
I can answer part of that previous employment. It can't be used. So like, for example, if I shoot somebody and I'm interviewed administratively and I say, yes, I shot him, yes, I did it on purpose, and I left the gun under that tree. And then I go into a different, and then I'm interviewed criminally and I say, I'm going to waive my Fifth Amendment right now and I'll talk to you. And I say, no, I didn't shoot him, and I have no idea where the gun is. It doesn't matter that I gave that interview. It doesn't matter. And you also, if you find the gun that I said was under the tree, you can't touch me criminally for it. They have to find it independently.
Poisonous tree.
That's the legal doctrine. Right. You can do it in reverse. You can do it in reverse. So if I say administratively, I did X, Y, Z, but then publicly I say I did A, B, C, then you can use it in my administrative forum to punish me. But not
Wait, let's get the question in the back. She had her hand up first.
I'm wondering if you're aware of practices in other police departments that you would like to see, in this specific matter that you do, the officer-involved shooting, practices in other police departments that you would like to see in Philadelphia?
Regarding the investigation of the incident?
Yeah, the criminal investigation.
Well, one of them would be I would want more people to kind of go into this woman's suggestion too. The reason there were no other females or other blacks was there was only 30 detectives out of that 200 that put in for it. So out of those 30, that was what I was left with, the best of that group. So I would want, number one, a bigger group of individuals to be on the, whether they're female, black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, and I would want give me a better pool of talent, number one. There's certain things that certain jurisdictions do. For instance, I think it's Dallas, where they take an interview from the officer in a timely fashion too, within that 3-day period, sometimes a couple days, and it is privy to the criminal investigative unit. Like right now, I can't. That's not
really?
How do we go about getting that changed?
Wow, that's
Probably
huge.
the same way as you were talking about some other things.
Your policy.
The policy and
Well, that
procedure.
was my question, is just like where, does this come from the contract, or is this something that's decided by the police department, or like the way that this is set up?
It's a little bit of everything. Each department has their own setup, and we kind of follow like a best practices. And again, I've been doing it for 20 years. I look at different things around the country and I say, oh, that would be good. Kind of going to your question, I'm inquisitive. I would like to know what the discharging officer said. I can't have it under this new setup that we have because I'm just doing criminal, and I can't be told what he says administratively. I'd like to know what he says because that that completes the puzzle for me, and that's just how Steve Nolan is. I want to know what everybody said in the incident.
Makes your job more challenging too.
Well, sure. But if I can't have it, I'm not going to cry over spilled milk. I'm going to function with whatever you put in place for me, the rules that you give me.
But how can we help you change that so you would have access to
Well, you can't help me change it because I'm done in September.
But like,
And I say, I don't mean to be facetious, but yeah, just like you're saying, is the kind of when you hear about different things, whether it's with the police department function or the fire department function or the city streets department function, that you find flaws or deficiencies or something that you don't like, is to kind of make it known to your leader, your council people, your police commissioner, and Commissioner Ross. I've known Commissioner Ross for years, worked with him in other investigations, and those who know him, he's listened, he's doing what he can.
I'm curious, considering the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, which inures to the police as well as to private citizens, what suggestion do you have to overcome the problem with administrative statements versus criminal statements? How can we possibly get access to the administrative statement considering the constitutional rights involved? What's your suggestion?
Bring in Attorney General, look at Pennsylvania code and see if Pennsylvania code.
We're talking about the Constitution now.
I don't know, you know a lot more about criminal law than I do, but what if you, if it were just required when you sign on to be a police officer that you agree that you aren't going to assert your, I don't know if you can waive that right in advance when you sign on.
I mean, that's a suggestion,
Right.
but
Yeah.
you think about it. Who's going to waive that right as a police officer?
Well, is that how it works in other cities? I don't know.
That's right.
but I guess,
in Dallas.
yeah, that,
You
if,
just said
I'm just saying, yeah, like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
were saying that in Dallas, they do it in this different way, and
So
so
there's
how is
definitely
that? What do we
a model
need to do to set
And it kind of goes
ourselves
like, you kind of touched on a little bit, in Dallas, their setup is such that when you come into the police department, it's already known, it's a past practice. Philadelphia's is this practice, Chicago's is this practice, LAPD is this practice. So it might be Dallas is when you come into the police department, here's all the rules and regulations, this is how we do this particular thing. So it doesn't mean that one agency is doing it wrong or bad, or it's just that's the setup when they came in. To me personally, like I said, the best thing for the police department is they're getting an interview from their officer in a timely fashion. And when I say there was one shooting that happened where the officer was not clear for 6 years and he died before we can interview him, that's just crazy. And most of them on average are about 4 or 5 months. And again, this isn't the DA's office when George is there. They want to see everything, and I get that. They want to see the ballistics report. They want to see the crime scene report. They want to see everybody's interview. They want to see all the video. Some of that stuff doesn't happen like that, so it takes a while. They want to see everything before they make a ruling on whether they're going to charge an officer. So you had that long delay. But now, when you take a compelled administrative interview, you're getting information from the guy who's involved in the incident, the police department is, and the commissioner can say, he gets it, the commissioner gets to see it as soon as the ink's dry on the paper. And if he looks at the interview and says, I don't like what I see here, and he's called me at times and told me that, he can't tell me what the officer said. He says, Steve, I read his interview, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z with him. You got it, Commissioner, you're the commissioner. So the police department, the boss of the police department now gets the compelled interview after 3 days, and he can't do anything criminally. He can't say, I want Officer Nolan charged criminally, but he can say, Officer Nolan violated our directive, section such and such, I'm going to sanction him or her. So you see, to me, there's a benefit now, as opposed to the old way. And trust me, I sent memos upon memos years ago to the point where I felt like a clanging gong, where I would say that, can we change this process? Can we do this? We should be doing this. We should be doing that. Make it better. And it finally came about, so it came about. So I like this new process. And sad to say, I'm done in September. If I didn't sign up for the drop, I would have stayed longer. Because to me, it's a good process.
So would that person be removed you were just speaking about? Is he removed from the force, or is he just put in another duty in the force?
Commissioner Ross did it with Pownell.
So he's removed from the force?
He was removed from the force based on what the commissioner weighed his actions.
But that was a pretty public, obvious case.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Can't the FOP challenge that?
Oh, they already have. But the commissioner can still now say, I have his interview after 3 days, as opposed to 6 months later, and I made the decision that I don't want him on the force because. So it doesn't, and I know we look at, you know, public outcry and there's more pressure, and certainly that's going to have some effect, but, and again, I don't speak for the commissioner, but knowing him, Commissioner Ross doesn't need anybody like telling him what to do, or he's going to make a decision, and he called me about the Pownell case. He's going to make the decision he's going to make. That's his choice.
I meet with the commissioner I meet with the commissioner with the Malcolm Jenkins Committee. So we deal with issues centered more around police brutality to come up with concepts that look at either training within the police department or police regulations with captains and inspectors to start talking about those issues. It doesn't seem like this shooting unit or the shooting issues around the police department have that same opportunity, because it's pretty much cut and dry. For outsiders, for citizens to get involved, to speak to what could happen, to bring, I guess, what I would call justice to those who create those issues.
Well, I respect your opinion. In fact, when you said earlier, like, how can you trust Steve Nolan? I get that. I'm not naive enough to think that. But I can guarantee everybody in this room, if a police officer discharges a weapon, you want Steve Nolan investigating it. Not because Steve Nolan's all that.
So what happens when Steve Nolan retires in September?
I have some people in mind who are going to take my place,
okay,
who are pretty good. But as I said, you can tell me that you're going to take an investigation that I did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and put it on the Channel 6 News tomorrow night. I'd say go right ahead. I don't pick and choose. I don't, you know, if this officer just fired his gun, and I know him because I played softball with him, and I know there's some bad issues, I don't kick it over there. But that's me. That's Steve Nolan. So I'm not losing my job for him, even if we went through battle together. And I know that people are looking at me. The district attorney's office is looking at what I did. The PAC commission can look at what I did. The PAC commission can come to any scene. In fact, I call Hans just to make sure if the shooting comes out now, I get notified by the police radio. And first thing I do is if it's an individual that we shot. I don't usually bother Hans for a dog or an accidental. Hans, did you get notified about the shooting? He can come to the scene, or Anthony can come to the scene. And they can't go inside the tape. I can't let them inside like to process the scene with me, but they can get I'll bring them up there. Anthony or Hans, here's, the officer was over here. That marker you see there, that's one of his casings there. That blood there is, we believe that's a suspect. I brief them on everything. And I kind of keep them in the loop, more so Hans than Anthony, as to where we're at with the shooting. And Hans calls me after each shooting, Lieutenant Nolan, is there anything more you have since we last talked? So there's that checks and balances that's in place. But again, I could walk out here tonight and you say, Nolan, he's a good thing, man. He's a cop. He's investigating John McNesby. What do you think he's going to come up with? I can't change that.
No, we want to go ahead, Michael.
So the first thing I would like to say is thank you for improving the process. The moment that you started off by saying it could take 4 or 6 months, 6 years, or never to interview somebody that's mortified, 6 months out, somebody's recall is worthless. It also, interviewing them within 3 days deprives them of that time to try to manufacture a narrative that fits the way they behave. So I think that we can all acknowledge this is better. But Anthony, your anecdote about what you could say in this interview versus what you say elsewhere, and they could be wholly incompatible, and yet we're powerless to do anything about that, affirming that also horrifies me. So we can say better, yet there's still much more better that we can accomplish. And so perhaps what I'm suggesting, another fear is that we might find ourselves going down the path where it becomes about the contract again, right? So that we find in 6 months, what are the best practices in Dallas, in Las Vegas, in LA, wherever, that these kinds of contractual agreements, or whatever it might be the origin of your policies, the OIS investigative unit's policies, to make this both improve accuracy but also accountability, perhaps we could put it on the investigative unit to research some of those best practices in cities outside of Philadelphia and make some recommendations just in time for you to pass that off to your successor.
And the reason I'm smiling is I love what I do. I take pride in it. Of course. I am in contact with people from LAPD, Chicago PD, Houston. I researched the 5 largest departments, us being one of them. And Again, I teach a 2-day course on that because I like what I do and I want to help other people and I want to interact. So yeah, the most telling thing, and I hate to take your time here, I know you have other things to do. In 2010, the Philadelphia Police Department had 92 police shootings, or 94, whatever it was. In 2010, the New York City Police Department had 92 police shootings in 94. The New York City Police Department is 6 times larger than the Philadelphia Police Department, and in 2010, we had the same amount of police shootings. That's phenomenal to me. So I called the New York City Police Department and I said, what are you guys doing that you're 6 times larger than us? I thought they were fudging the numbers or they weren't investigating what we investigated. They investigated the same shootings we do, on duty, off duty, whether you hit somebody, accidental, suicide, unauthorized use. I said, can I come up and see what you guys are doing? The New York City Police Department has a lot more money than the Philadelphia Police Department and the LAPD and Chicago and Houston because they're getting all kinds of federal money thrown at them. They have Attack Village, they have Attack, TAC, Tactical, Attack Village, Attack House. They have a whole city block set up. If this is their training room, you walk out the door and there's a city block, a fake city block set up that has a 4-story tenement building, mailboxes. They put their officers through all kinds of scenarios. The agency that trains is going to have the least amount of shootings. It's a no-brainer, okay? So I came back to my police department and I said, we got to train a lot better. We got to make our officers better decision makers before they squeeze the trigger. And this is not a knock, and it wasn't Commissioner Ross at the time, but some other bosses. Good idea, Steve. Okay, what's up on the agenda next? And that was my frustration. So, but that didn't stop me. So I just keep on plugging away and saying, here's what we got to do. So to answer your question, I do that. I've done that. I will continue to do that in whatever I do once I retire, and whether it's consulting or not, I'm going to probably do something like that. But my successor, whoever that may be, I will work with them. I will give them everything that I have and help them as well.
Can we go here? Because I think I cut you off. No? You good? Okay. In the back and then in the front.
Okay. In the DOJ report, they talk quite a bit about the lack of sufficient training and ongoing training for police officers, and that really contributed to shootings and other things. Do you feel that, I have not read how the Philadelphia Police Department responded to the report as a whole, but do you think that the police department responded to that part of the DOJ report and said, yes, we really have to start giving our police officers adequate training?
Absolutely, and here's why I say that. We averaged 92 police shootings a year from the time I got on the shooting team in '98 until a few years ago. It started to gradually come down. Last year we had 33 police shootings in Philadelphia. That is great. That would be great if there's only one or none. That'll never happen. But to go from an average of 90s down to 33, and of those 33, 13, I believe, involved individuals. Half of police shootings in most major jurisdictions are animal incidents, dogs. SWAT serving a warrant, pit bull dog tries to attack them, they shoot the dog. At least half of police shootings nationally are like that. So 33 police shooting incidents, that's great. And to me, it can get even better. We're on a pace to be even lower this year because the police department has adopted those recommendations, pretty much all of them, because the police department is doing more training. And I do training up at the academy for the recruits before they even set foot on the street. So yeah, I think we've embraced a lot of that. Can we do better? Absolutely.
We're gonna have to wrap this up.
You took my question.
No, we appreciate it, because did you have?
She took my question.
Oh, okay. So Melissa will give you the last question.
Okay, so is it true that when officers come on the course, they go through an initial psych evaluation?
They were, and it's changed. When I came on, I went through one, then it stopped, and then now they have it again, then it stopped. So to answer your question, I don't want to tell you something that's erroneous. I believe there is some type of psych evaluation, but I don't know if it's as in-depth as when I went through.
I think it's important we should know the psychological status of an officer that's going to have access to a weapon. Also, is it true that the next time that an officer receives a psych eval is if he's involved in discharging his firearm? Is that correct?
Every time a police officer discharges a weapon, accidentally, intentionally, on duty, off duty, they have to do what's called a post-discharge shooting up at the range. They have to go up to the range and requalify. They have to see a University of Pennsylvania psychiatrist to be evaluated to make sure that they're fit to come back to duty. So everybody gets evaluated.
So I guess my concern is if in fact an officer gets an initial psych eval coming on the force, and the next time he doesn't get a psych eval, him or her rather, is when there is a discharge of a firearm, and knowing that our officers are exposed to trauma after trauma after trauma, call, isn't there a concern that how are these officers processing the day-to-day trauma, and they're not seeing any kind of psychiatrist or psychologist because they have to process what they've dealt with and go on to the next call, go home to their families, their wives and their kids, back on the job. That alone is problematic, wouldn't you say?
True.
And Melissa, I have said that to 3 commissioners, and all 3 commissioners have said to me it's a union issue. That's why we got to be on.
Does it go back to him and Leslie guys?
All 3 commissioners.
Said what?
That is a union issue. The union would not allow for those, because I had suggested that it needs to be every other year some kind of psych evaluation based on the fact of what you just said, trauma.
Yes.
And I can use a quick example, I'll be quick. The young man who was known, what's the guy who was with President Obama, he was recognized for the shooting?
Richard the Coachworth.
Yeah, the Coachworth. I saw him one day on the street, and the expression on his face scared me. And I said to Commissioner Ramsey, that young man needs help. And he got in trouble again, and he finally got it off the force. Wow. So if you're going through any police officer, I'm sensitive to this now, it wasn't before. But if you're out there on the streets every day and you're seeing maybe babies being killed, you're seeing, trauma stuff, you got trauma. So I suggested that every year, there should, or every other year, there should be a police evaluation, a psych evaluation. And once again, 3 commissioners.
I think it's a public safety issue.
I mean, the other thing is quickly too, is look at the physical shape. I mean, I saw a police officer the other day, and I looked at him and I know he doesn't pass a donut store without a dozen donuts. I mean, he was that big. They don't have to have a physical after they're on the force. So those 2 issues would, and I think both of them would be good for the citizens as well as the police officers.
So the meeting is beyond our scheduled time. Marcel, did you want to make a quick comment about the online complaint forms?
So, I'm sorry. At our last meeting that we had, there was some talk about our online complaint form secure. Basically what we did was we actually got some students from Drexel to try and hack it, and they couldn't. So, just so you know, and it's actually, I'm being serious.
I believe you.
Make sure I knew what coding was dragging. But our online complaint form is secure, so basically we do accept online complaints through online. We have been. That's where most of ours have been. We even talk to people, send them there. I'm working on translating into different languages so it's accessible. I'm going through the list of the top languages spoken in Philadelphia in order. So doing that preferential. And also our next meeting is April 16th. It's going to be the South Philadelphia Library from 6:30 to 8.
It actually says 6:30 to 7:50.
Oh, because they close at 8. That was my agreement.
So thank you all for your questions. Thank you, Lieutenant Nolan. Thank you, Mr. Ramos. I hope that you'll both come back to all of our meetings with standing invitation. Thank you all. Get home safe.
You were really great. I learned so much and you did not lose your cool.
You guys have the hardest job. So it's not like kids. Yes, there's some construction problems, but it also, I appreciate you being here today. Sometimes we get inundated. I said, well, where